Welcome to CPF Firewire, a podcast from California professional firefighters where we discuss a wide range of issues affecting firefighters, our unions, our families, and the communities we serve.
Hello and welcome to the CPF Firewire. I'm the CPF President Brian Rice. And if you've come on the job as a firefighter in the last decade or so, there's many aspects of the job that you always just figured were there. You know, good pay, overtime pay, great health benefits, up-to-date personal protective gear, training, promotional opportunities. We went from really having no process for grievance and discipline to having a rock-solid grievance and discipline process. We have one of the most secure and absolutely best retirements in the nation that honors the work that you do. And these benefits that we have on the job, they weren't given to us because we drive around in big red or we look good in blue. These benefits are because of our unions, and our unions fought for them, and in some cases put their own safety and freedom on the line. Today, we're going to begin an occasional series of podcasts. We're going to look at the history of our firefighter labor movement and what it was like in, I'll call them the dark ages of our profession, going back to the 70s and pre-70s, the battles that were fought, the people that sacrificed to win the benefits that we have today. Let that sink in for a second. The people that fought to help provide us the benefits that we have today. And we're going to start by looking back at the firefighter strikes of the 1970s. There was a time when conditions were so bad for firefighters that we were actually forced to go on strike so that our voices could be heard. And one of those strikes took place in October of 1970 in Sacramento. It was a 3-week strike that built a legacy of union solidarity that continues to this day. And joining me today is, you know, literally, not literally, my number one mentor and hero in the union movement and fire service union movement, and that's Dick Mayberry, my past president of Local 522. And, you know, Dick was a young man and had just started out in the fire service at the time of the strike in Sacramento. And as the strike took shape, Dick became one of management's focuses of attention. Hard to believe, Dick. In fact, he was actually arrested for his involvement. He went on to become the president of Local 522, and not only was a longtime member of the CPF executive board, but he's mentored many, many young firefighters along the path. And so right now, Dick, I'd like to welcome you to the CPF Firewire.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you for those kind words.
It's great to have you. And I want to kind of go back in time. And what was it like kind of from when you came on the job, you know, start as you're coming on the job as a recruit. What was labor like? What was the contract like? What was the union? What was 522 like prior to that fateful day in October? And how receptive was the city to you? What were the things you guys were living through?
Well, when I came on in 1964, I was 23 years old, married with 2 young children, a son that was 7 and a daughter that was 3. And I came on and I was so excited. I mean, it was just exciting to come on, you know, and I was looking forward to a career, you know. I just felt as though that I'm where I want to be, you know. But so when I came on in '64, I really didn't have anything to measure what it was then against any other kind of measurement. So,
Dick, growing up as a young man, did you grow up in a union household? Were you aware of unions, or was this kind of early introduction to you for organized labor?
It was an early introduction for organized labor.
Okay. So you started like many young firefighters today. There's less and less union households and more young firefighters that are coming in without a solid labor or a union background.
Yeah, but at the same time, well, I didn't have any connection per se. Most of our firefighters were on the job at that period of time, and for probably another 6 or 8 years after I came on, did have a lot of labor experience and background. You know, they came out of crafts, building trades.
Right.
You know, they came out of the railroads. You know, they came They came with already having a union, and some of them already had some strike experience, at that time.
I want to jump forward a little bit into kind of that year prior to going on strike. You'd got several years under your belt. Obviously, you had a feeling for what Local 522 was in the day. What was that 12-month period, kind of October 69 leading up to October 1970? And most people won't remember the amount of strife in our communities in those days. Talk to me. Let's go through kind of October 69 leading up to the strike. What were you guys? And I hate to say this to people because there weren't any women in the fire service at that time. But what was the workforce for the Sacramento area facing at that time?
Well, the 60s. When I came on, we had canister masks. We didn't have self-contained masks. We had to buy our own uniforms. We had kind of the safety equipment that was antiquated. The masks that we were using came out of the coal miners, with the birds.
Still MSA, but that's where it came from.
Yeah. So, and I realized, that it was because I had to come out of the Army. And I realized it was kind of more militarized, speak when you're spoken to, stand in line and salute, and things of that nature. And as far as the union and labor activities, one thing I guess was as a young firefighter that maybe was a little different for the norm is I went to every union meeting. I right when I came on, realized that, hey, I want to attend those meetings. I want to see what's going on, And so then moving forward, to the 69 before the strike, our bargaining, we didn't have bargaining. There was no Myers-Millis-Brown. That Myers-Millis-Brown didn't come in. They gave us some bargaining rights. Into 69, I think. So what we had to do, was we weren't involved in politics, very little politics. We went to our civil service board was the group, the organization that did salary surveys, and they made recommendations to the city council as to what wages should be given. Kind of a whole different world.
So Civil Service Commission did a salary survey, presented it to the city, and the city decided where the Sacramento Fire Department needed to fall in that survey, and that's what you were given.
That's what we were given, yeah. And most of the work that we did, most of our guys before me, that were there, the ones that were taking care of the union business, they didn't have much to work with, But they did. They did a lot. They came through. It's amazing with not much to work with. How well they did. They did surveys. We had a 6-city by that time survey. We did most of the work of what was given to the civil service. All of the background, all of the positions that we had were given. Were done by the firefighters, and the cops just they kind of rode our coattail.
I remember the coattail award between the SPOA and Local 522.
That was fun. That was later, but at the same time, we had parity then too.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So you had parity. Police and fire had parity in the city of Sacramento.
Which parity meaning that we were paid the same wages and benefits. And parity became an issue in 69, and then parity became an issue in 70.
And forever.
And forever. Well, yeah. So yeah, it was a whole different. It was a whole different world, at that time. I mean, in a world we all lived in, right. In the world we did well with, but yes. But it was evolving. It was evolving pretty rapidly.
What? The working conditions and rules, obviously, not obviously, I believe one of the strike points was the work week, firefighters were working more than, was it 64 hours? How many hours a week were you working?
We were working a 60-hour week.
60-hour week. I was also told, I was talking to Mike Johnson about this, and Mike, you and Mike came on at about the same time, I think. I mean, he might have been a little after you.
Yeah, probably a year or two after me.
And one of the things that he said, Brian, when I came on your days off, you had to let the city know if you were going to be out of town or seek permission to go out of town. What were kind of some of the things that you had to experience that are unheard of today as far as daily work rules and shift rules?
Well, because we were working a 60-hour week, one thing, and that our schedule became more of that of a 56. We had to come back. We had to give them back off-duty time to come back for 5 days, where we would come off duty to do fire prevention work, or
5 days in a year.
5 days in a year. They had us come back. To do on an 8-hour day, to do fire prevention work or burn grass, to mitigate, the grass heaving.
I can remember Engine 7 in Valley High when I was working as a laborer, watch them burning off a field kind of down in that Florin and Stockton area. And just one engine and 4 guys out, and burning off a field. You guys came back and did that for free.
For free. That was their way of saying, okay, you're working at 60, but what you're giving them 56, so you're going to work your 60 by doing that. Well, and you were in a when you first came in the department, you were in a rotating, which was good. It was then, and it still goes on today. Right. So I'm not going to complain about that. But as an example. St. Patty's Day parade. We always were. Sacramento City Fire Department was always had a float, and we always won the grand prize. I mean, 7 out of 10 years we would win. But the reason we were winning is because they made us work on the float on duty. We had to build that float, and we're ordered to build that float. So that was what kind of the thing. The semi-military, you well do as I say.
How was there such thing as a grievance process? If you had an issue with the contract or you felt you were paid incorrectly, what was the process for you to go to the city and the union to use to rectify the issof
There really was none.
There wasn't one.
No.
What about discipline?
Discipline, similarly, all of the rights, all of what they then had were management rights. We didn't have any recourse in discipline. We didn't have any recourse in seniority.
You got what you got.
You got what you got, and so there was very little of what we have now in our union contracts to address those kinds of things. The chief, said, you're going to be disciplined. You're going to take 3 shifts off, and that was it. It just happened. You had nothing to say about it, and the union didn't have any. I mean, we could always go to the council or have a council, but that was not very prevalent either. The council kept their distance, right, and all the rest of the stuff. The manager owned us. The manager owned us.
We kind of talked a little bit about what life was like to be a firefighter leading up to 1970, and we'll progress a little bit to the months before 1970, and knowing you and your belief in labor and your belief in dignity and respect in the workplace. Just give me a handful of things that drove you to the position, and I'll use this term, but I want you to get into it more because there's a very famous local speech. What really drove you to cross the Rubicon? I know there were some sentinel things in there that you went, this just can't stand.
Well, of course, the negotiations had broken down, but that was the negotiating committee, the executive board, that was privileged to more of that inside stuff. But for us, rank and file, the everyday firefighter, what really caused us to become really pissed off was when the negotiations broke down. And the city started demeaning us publicly. They would have press conferences of how we're undereducated, how we sleep, and we only work so many hours, and we only put so much time in, and with that being said, I could go on and on with the dirtiness of what they did in their public relations, which ended up screwing them. It backfired on them. But nevertheless, what it did, the backfiring was, it made all of us, all 415 firefighters, angry. I mean, really angry how they described us publicly. And humiliating, demeaning.
Kind of things that are a little bit hard to, in this day and age, picture or fathom. Those are things that they just don't happen today. And so it's hard. I think it's hard for a lot of listeners and myself to really go back and put yourself in the shoes of being a firefighter in the 60s and 70s, a truly noble profession. It was growing, it was evolving, and then to be demeaned by your local leaders. We, the listeners now and people on jobs, it's hard for us to comprehend that. It was a different time and a different age. The weeks before the strike, what was that like? What was the deliberation like? What was the final city council meeting like? And then, we're going out.
We had the part and party to this was we had the Myers-Milius-Brown, which started giving us some rights.
Started to help.
And we had carpetbaggers that came into Sacramento. They come from out of the city. They were young Turks, and their city director of personnel, assistant city manager Tom Hebner, Dick Rathon came out of, I think, World War I, and we had a council that was silent. They were afraid of the manager. The manager,
Who was the city manager during this?
Dick Rathon.
Dick Rathon, okay.
And he was come out of World War I. But anyway, so they want. I think they were wanting to build their resumes. Mm-hmm. They wanted to, with the Myers-Milius-Brown. They wanted to. I think they wanted a strike. I think they kind of moved us into the direction of a strike, and I think they did it kind of purposely to kind of break our union with the idea that we're going to start now. We're the young guys, in management, and this law that went into effect. We're going to make sure that the law is not going to give you what you think it is supposed to give you. We're going to break you down, and so. I talked about the city manager. You had the city director of city personnel. You had assistant city manager. You had the city attorney. They were all at the bargaining table. And so they wouldn't give us any considerations. I mean,
now at that time, were you on the bargaining team?
No.
You were a rank and file firefighter.
Rank and file firefighter.
That's important to note here. And I'm going to ask you, you're a rank and file firefighter. You have a young family, somewhat newly married. You have young kids. The prospect of going on strike. What were your thoughts? Were there fears? Your livelihood, your career. What was some of the internal struggles that you had with this?
I think the younger firefighters were more adaptive.
Okay.
I think the younger firefighters, just felt as though we're not going to put up with this. We came on the job. If we have to go on strike, we will. And
you went on strike over, and this is really important, your working conditions, how the city treated you, to upend the established quote unquote labor relations in the city of Sacramento, meaning you'll take it and you'll like it. This wasn't political. It wasn't over political ideology. It wasn't red. It wasn't blue. This is working men and women wanting dignity and respect in their workplace, period.
And without having given that to us, the city manager and what they did publicly, their public relations, what they did is they caused our older firefighters, our firefighters that already had 20 years on or 30 years on. Who would have ever thought that those firefighters would walk out on strike? Some of them close to retiring and their pension would be affected. You're obviously going to be without pay. Your pay is going to be reduced. Your pension is going to be reduced.
And I'm going to make an assumption here that your employment was at risk.
Absolutely. We weren't naive to the belief and that when we walk off the job, you're in effect putting your job at risk up to and including termination.
I don't know if it's a term that's around the fire service statewide, but I certainly know it's a term that I've heard over and over in the Sacramento area, and that is you do not leave your post until you are properly relieved. And essentially, that day that you all went out, the city at that time could have looked at every one of you as you've abandoned your post, therefore you're terminated.
And that's exactly what position they took.
Let's go to the night of the city council meeting and talk to me through John
Steely.
John Steely, and I had the honor to spend some time with John when I was an early president at 522 back in 2002 or 3. But he's got that famous speech. Let's go through that night. What was a council meeting like? How many firefighters were there? What was the mood? Talk to me about that.
Council chambers was packed. Kirk Stubbs was our president of our local, and John Steely and Kurt Stubbs made presentations to the council. John Steely's was eloquent. I mean, it was unbelievably eloquent, but it was also saying it as it is, telling them what they haven't done, what they should be doing, how they haven't given us considerations, how they've demeaned us, and that was the last part of what he said, is historical.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He said, we've tried the council. We've done everything we can, to have a contract that is fair, and we've tried to negotiate in good faith. We've had a mediator come in, and the mediator has proposed settlements that the city took no thought, just put it aside. We've asked for binding arbitration, and you haven't listened to us. The Sacramento Bee endorsed binding arbitration for the firefighters.
Let's say that again. The Sacramento Bee endorsed binding arbitration for the firefighters. Endorsed
binding arbitration, and they gave us sympathy. Actually,
so there might have been some public sentiment that wasn't the same as the city of Sacramento leadership.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. So he went through that whole presentation of and with ending that you've brought us at this point to we're at the brink of the Rubicon. We are at the brink. We don't want to cross that Rubicon, but you've put us into that position. You're going to leave us with what you're doing. No choice. We will cross the Rubicon.
I remember that. In fact, I want to get that because I would like to attach that, if we can get a quality enough, attach that to this podcast. It really paints a picture. And the one thing that I remember, we are poised and I won't have the words exactly right, but the ending I will. We are poised at the edge of the Rubicon, and we intend to cross. Makes me emotional just saying that.
It does me. It still does. It still does. But he does it so eloquently too.
Yes, No, I couldn't deliver that. I'd be MFing, and it would not go well for me.
I probably would too.
But so, John, that speech is given. The council takes action. What does the next 24 hours look like? You can't just go on strike. There are things that have to happen to do that. Let's kind of get through that and then get to that first day on the picket line. All the things that needed to take place to be successful in taking that job action.
Well, yes. We didn't do this in a vacuum. I mean, we had the international representatives there. Harry Williams was a IFF representative. We had the Federated Firefighters representation with Ken Larson, was executive secretary of the Federated Firefighters. Was having the presence on a routine basis. We had meetings of which they talked to us about the strike. They talked to us about what it meant. They talked to us about it's going to be hard. You're going to have a lot of criticisms. And they didn't paint just a rosy picture. We appreciated what they were there. They were there to help, and they were to advise.
You went in there with a pretty good knowledge of this. The last day I worked could be the last day I was a firefighter for the city of Sacramento. That is what was on the line.
Exactly.
It's not just winning a contract, winning dignity and respect in the workplace. There was personal risk to every single member of the Sacramento Fire Department and Local 522.
When we took the vote, which was shortly after that council meeting, when we took the vote, we had 415 firefighters that were members of the union. Almost everyone was a member of the union. 415. There were about 390 that were at the meeting. 390 at the meeting, and the vote was like 365 voted yes to strike.
Wow.
365 of those, maybe 390 that were there, that were actually there. And these are guys, like I said, these are the guys that had everything to lose. I mean, they had everything to lose. But the city demeaned them to the extent they tried to humiliate them, and they made our old guys angry. They really made them angry. They walked. The city never ever thought they would walk. The city's belief was they would have maybe 60% that would walk, and 40% would stay in, and that would break. They would break the strike. They would terminate the strike leaders. And when we walked with 98% of our firefighters walked out.
The vote was taken. You vote 98% to go out on strike. Let's go from that point. What was your role as a Sacramento firefighter and Local 522 member? Not an executive board member, but a rank and file firefighter member.
Well, let me preface this by saying this was the hardest decision. I think it was an easier decision for the younger guys, but it was the hardest decision that could ever been made. In a career where those firefighters, older firefighters, had to make a decision that they had a sworn oath, and to take that sworn oath and put it into context of we have a sworn oath, but we also have the right to be respected and be treated fairly. So if you're not going to do that, then our sworn oath, you violated it to the extent we're going to put ourselves. We're going to walk on strike because if you can't honor your part of the deal, then we're not going to honor our part of the deal either.
And thinking about it the whole time, just listening and I try to put myself in the shoes of a veteran, 20, 25-year firefighter, and you saying that, I realize how important that oath is. And it's always been important to me. It's
in our heart.
Yes, exactly. And to be there and realize I have to put this aside for what is right. And that's not even thinking about I'm essentially terminating myself. I'm essentially, in those days, probably walking away from a pension. I have no doubt that the protections on your pension were probably not very good. The risk to do that to me is daunting.
I have the greatest respect for particularly those older firefighters. The greatest respect in the world. that was the hardest thing for them to have probably, other than, a loss of family life or a loss of, maybe a marriage or something like that. It was like going to be a loss of your job that you had dedicated a lot of years to, and they put the union and our purpose and the need, they first and foremost.
Go ahead. No, didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, but there was obviously the day of the strike. One shift got off, and there was no shift to come in to take our places.
Where were you assigned? What was your assignment as a firefighter? And let's start from that day when the last shift went off duty. Where were you assigned, and what was that like?
Well, you mentioned it earlier. That there's a tremendous amount of work that has to be done, prior to that day you walk off the job. There's a lot of logistics. We had a strike headquarters, that had to be there, and it was set up to be there, and it was functional when we walked on that day.
Where was it at?
1919 K Street.
1919 K Street.
And we had our union office on I think it was 28th Street, 2500 block of 28th Street. So
a lot of logistics. I want to ask you this, because labor was big in Sacramento. What allied labor unions were not only supportive, but what are the ones that you just couldn't have done it without them?
Yeah, that's a good question, Brian. We weren't very active in the labor movement. We were parochial, we took care of our own business to the extent that we did. We belonged to our labor council, but we weren't active in our labor council. So we did get a strike sanction from our labor council, but because we hadn't participated, we didn't get a whole lot of union on picket lines. I mean, we had some building trades, that honored our picket lines, but we had more that didn't. But there was one union, that the day we walked on strike, and it was AT, Amalgamated Transit Union. Chuck Yelke was the president of the Amalgamated Transit Union. That's the bus drivers, and he was also on the State Federal Labor's executive board. The day we walked, by agreement, we had already had contact. We had worked with the President Yelke, and they were going to withhold their services.
Wow.
And what we did was that with their blessing was we picketed, the bus stations, the bus depots, not the station, but the bus depots. So that was their reason they were able to say,
we're not crossing the line.
We're not crossing the picket line.
Does everybody understand that? The firefighters picketed at the workplaces and work sites or dispatch centers for city buses. And because of that, the bus drivers, the amalgamated transit drivers, would not cross the line, which essentially shut down the city bus service.
They got more play, as the effect of the buses, having shut the city down than us. Oh, I didn't bring up too. Well, I will after this, but yeah, and they stayed. They withheld their services for 4 days. 4 days.
That's strong. That's a lot.
And then we by agreement, they went back to work. But also, what we believed, and this is really important. What we believed when we went on strike, that it would be relatively short. That the city would be without a fire department. And that we would have the leverage, to come to a fair and just agreement. But Ronald Reagan was the governor, and Ronald Reagan ordered the California Department of California CDF, California. It's Cal Fire now,
right.
But he ordered them to become strikebreakers, and there was 140 CDF firefighters that came in and manned our stations. shortly after we left the station, they came in and became, and went and took over our jobs there. Most of them did it, because they were ordered. They didn't have a choice. They weren't a union department at the time.
Right.
And some of them, obviously enjoyed it. And so that was a setback. That was something,
a different day and a different age.
And the other thing, too, is the leadership, even though they were non-union, the leadership of CDF, I mean, they were an association, but the leadership of that association supported us, from the beginning.
Right.
One of the things that I was just, everyone was just ecstatic, were the CDF wives. The wives of CDF firefighters joined our picket line.
There you go.
And they picketed the Capitol. They picketed the Capitol. So there you go.
Yes, there's always more to the story. I'm thank you for that memory. I did not know that. So I know that as the strike progressed, it wasn't all rainbows and unicorns and lollipops. It was hard. It was physical. There were arrests. And let's kind of talk about you. What was what during the strike? What was your job? What did you do? Because I think you were pretty central to the story as it plays out.
Yeah, well, and the logistics included, every day, you had an assignment. I mean, you went to the strike headquarters, and they had already a business model, you might say, to where what you were doing during the course of the strike. So they had strike captains, that when you go out on a site, there would be maybe a one of your firefighters would be in charge, and so on and so forth. So they had an extensive plan and where you picketed, what time you picketed, and all of that, as well as just the logistics of food and rest and all of that. Well, for me, I just was mostly, given my directions, and I wasn't really I wasn't a strike captain, but we were often without a strike captain, so somebody kind of had to step up to the plate, and that's what took place at a strike where we were picketing at a particular construction site.
Talk me through it, because I think something happened there.
Well, yeah, something did happen. We were at a construction site, construction having to do with a city project, and it was on Fruit Ridge and Franklin Boulevard, but that we probably had maybe 25, 30 firefighters, and we probably had 40 cops there at the scene, at the site, as we were picketing. We obviously in picketing, caused some disruption, of the construction workers, and as we were walking in front of their equipment, it was kind of hard for them, to get their work underway. Well, so we had a police captain come up to us and said, "Look, you got one minute to move away from the equipment and let them go to work. You got 1 minute." So we had, two of us. Dale Head, it was a captain, and myself. We continued to disrupt their equipment until 59 seconds. I left. I backed off, but Dale didn't purposely. And they just come up, nicely and said, "Okay, sit in the squad car. we're going to remove you from the scene." But then it started getting a little more tense, there is where I took some you might say leadership in terms of meeting with the captain, and seeing if we couldn't find a pathway, we could picket without, getting in trouble. And so the captain told us, you walk your picket in this area, which was fine for us. So we agreed that there was a place to picket, and so as we started that. I'm walking alongside a good firefighter friend, and I hear this cop, start ranting about something. So he was saying, get out of here. Well, he was just being an ass. And I simply said to him, hey, talk to your captain. He's the one that told us this is where we walk. And after I said that, just walking another 10 steps, he come up from behind me. This guy was probably 6'2", probably 215 pounds. And he grabbed me around the neck like a chokehold, from behind. He lifted me off the ground and carried me about 10 feet, off the picket line. Fortunately, I couldn't swing at him because I would have. If I would have been able, I'd have thrown a punch that I'd hope I'd knocked him on his ass, but I wouldn't have, and he'd probably killed me.
Let me say this. Having known Dick for the better part of 30 years, I can attest that he would have thrown that punch. There's no question in my mind.
I would have. So we almost had a riot at that point. It was a conversion. The cops were conversing, the firefighters were conversing. It was really, really close. To a brawl.
What point in the strike were you? Was that in the beginning, early days, midway?
Well, the strike started on the 7th. The date of that occurrence was the 13th.
The 13th. So it was about a week into it.
About a week into
So did it de-escalate? Did you get arrested? How'd that end for you?
Well, the captain and lieutenants come up and they just got in between us all and they headed it off. They were able to separate us. And to me, they said, the captain said, well, I think you probably want to leave here, at this point in time. He says, so, what do you think? Is it time to leave? I said, time to leave. So I left. And I did have a neck injury. I mean, he hurt my neck, So then I went. There was nothing else. You just leave. That was it was all cool. Well, when I went to the hospital, because of the neck strain, now the cops got nervous, and then to protect themselves, they issued a warrant for my arrest.
I'll be darned. What was the charge?
It was like a failure to disperse or interfering with the operations of the police or whatever it might have been. It's a phony kind of thing. But they did issue a warrant.
They hook you up?
Well, they tried. They couldn't find me. I was always moving around where they never knew where the hell I was going to be. And they came to my house a couple of times at night to make the arrest. They never were able to make the arrest because I never let them. But when the strike was over, and I was back in the station, then I turned myself in.
No way. And what did they do?
Well,
there's not a mugshot with you in uniform, is there? There's not a mugshot with you in uniform, is there?
Not in uniform, no. but there is a mugshot.
So they hooked you up. They took you down and did.
No, yeah.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, there is a mugshot. I went in. I was booked. Fingerprinted, mugshotted.
So. Yeah, so the strike's over, you're back in the fire station, and you turned yourself in, and you were formally arrested. You were mugshotted, booked, fingerprinted. How'd that finish out?
Well, let me back up a little bit, too, just because this is a kind of a highlight, too, of the strike. They give, at some point, it was about the end of the first week, where the city told us that he gave us all a letter that you're going to be subject to termination, discipline up to and including termination if you don't go to work.
Everybody got that.
Everybody got that. Everybody got that.
Is that a point when most of the members, especially the old ones, the older veteran guys that really hung it out there, did everybody have a little bit of a sigh of relief that okay, it looks like we're still employed?
Up until that letter came, which was threatening. That was
okay. It was threatening. Okay,
it was very threatening. Yeah. So what we did, though, we collectively at Station 19, about everyone that was on strike, almost all of us, with family, kids, and everyone else, we came to where they were going to have this event take place. And we brought a burn barrel out there, and they had probably 40 cops from every highway patrol and Department of Defense and everything. So we took our letters and we made it a burn barrel, and every one of us put our letter into the burn barrel.
Wow.
And their eyes got kind of big, watching us do that. So that was just an interesting sideline.
It goes to the solidarity.
It goes to the solidarity.
And it goes to the commitment that I didn't know that, and that speaks really strongly that 415 everybody that got a letter burned it publicly in front of the city, in front of city administration. Message sent.
Solidarity.
Yes,
there was solidarity.
Where do we go from there?
Well, we go from there. We also took our probationaries out. We had 20 probationaries that we also took out on strike with us. One of them was my brother.
Ron went out as a probationary. I didn't. Okay, I knew he was out. I didn't realize he was probationary.
So they came on in like July, and so right after that event at the burn barrel, they terminated the probationaries. They flat terminated them. Said you don't have any rights. You turn in your badge, your pension, your contributions are refunded. They did all of that. You were gone. So I'll follow through on that in a bit. But for me personally, then. The strike's over now, and I've been arrested, and I'm scheduled for trial. So I do go to trial. They go to Superior Court. And the charges are what kind of, like I said, it's failure to disperse, interfering with the duties of a police officer and whatever. So the International. Gave the union a lot of grant money, for this, right? The International funded my trial, the attorneys. They funded it, and the attorney that represented was in fact the attorney group that was representing the Amalgamated Transit Union. They were the attorney of record for bus drivers. Mel Coben, Cooper, and Zyloff. Bud Zyloff was my attorney. So I'm in court. And the judge is kind of ironic. There's a kind of irony here too. Most people probably don't remember, but we had an attorney general that became a chief justice of the Supreme Court. Earl Warren became a chief justice of the United States. The judge presiding, Superior Court judge, was Earl Warren Jr. Anyway, the trial went on. It was about probably almost 2 weeks. Trial, just had a lot of the witnesses.
Wow.
Almost 2 weeks, and it included, witnesses being that of firefighters, the witnesses being that of the police, and that of the construction workers. Most of it had all of that. So, long story short is the judge called the attorneys to the bench and said, "Why are we doing this? This is bullshit. Why is this trial going on?" And the prosecutors, attorney said. The DA says, "Judge, I have to do that. I've been ordered to do this. I've been directed. Wow. This case, we have. I'm doing because I have to."
And what's interesting, the district attorney is a county of Sacramento, correct?
The county of Sacramento, yeah. So what the city wanted, they ordered the trial. They wanted to make me an example. They wanted me to be found guilty and obviously make a determination. Say, hey, don't ever do this stuff again because look what happened
to this guy.
So anyway, the jury. When it was sequestered, they went into jury deliberations. I think they were in about 3 hours until lunch. They had lunch. I think they waited until after lunch to come back, and I was acquitted.
That's great. Wow. Was there, you can't go through something like that. I imagine there were skirmishes all over the city at picket lines, not just yours. I imagine there were probably some physical altercations in different spots.
There wasn't too much of that.
Okay.
The cops were on. We had good cops. We had older cops, that appreciated all the work that we did, and we shared our camaraderie. But we had a lot of younger cops that thought they were better than we were and supported the city and all the rest of the stuff. I have to say too, that we had a lot of help on the picket lines.
Yeah.
We had buses coming from the Bay Area, Modesto. We had strike, people hopping on the picket. San Francisco sent busloads. A couple of hundred San Francisco firefighters a couple of times came in and helped us on the picket line. We had firefighter support from all over California.
That kind of gives a little bit of light on 522's relationship, not only with Modesto. It's always been strong with San Francisco. I know that LA County and Al Whitehead, and Dallas Jones, you guys were all really close during those times. So as the strike comes to an end, it comes to a conclusion, what does it look like? Did you guys feel success is very hard to define? Some people would define success in this instance that everybody in the city was slain. They were all beat the hell out of. We owned them. We this, we that. But that's not usually how success in an event like that works. And it never fully looks like what you wanted it to look like, but there's still success in it. Tell me about the strike ends, and what that led to, and the successes. I know there were successes and failures. There always are. But what were Sacramento and Local 522 able to take out of this, and how does it affect our future today?
You make a good point. The issues that we were negotiating had to do with holidays that we didn't have scheduled, the hours, salary, pay, all of those were the issues per se. When the strike ended, it ended because we had a temporary restraining order by Judge Bill Gallagher, was a Superior Court judge, and he had issued a temporary restraining for the strike. We disobeyed it. But when it came down to then a finalization, where it became a permanent restraining order, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, in terms of the legality. Now we were faced with jail time, so we had a union meeting. We had again the value of the international and
so you guys pushed this to the absolute hilt.
Right to the hilt. So it was because of that, when he made that ruling, it became a permanent restraining order, and we had no choice but go back to work. Probationaries were still fired. And so what happened at the end of the strike, we went back to work, and the mayor, Richard Marriott, was the mayor. We had a council that was silent. We had one guy on the city council that we adored.
Who was it?
We adored Rich Negro, Feather River Water Company, and he was our council guy. He was the only one of the 9 that spoke out for us. Spoke out for arbitration. But we had a mayor, that could care less about us. But the mayor happened, interestingly, to work for his full-time job in employment, his livelihood, he was the editor-publisher of the Labor Bulletin of Sacramento Central Council.
I'm just going to say it. Are you shitting me?
No. He was a full-time employee. So we went to Joe Zelensky, the executive secretary of our labor council, and said, Joe, this is something you have to do. We're telling you in no uncertain terms, you have to do this. You have to tell your employee, that those probationaries are coming back, or your history, Mr. Mayor. And they did. And our guys were back shortly thereafter.
There's always leverage. You always got to watch.
Yeah. So from there, so we didn't win particularly our issues for that moment, but we won the strike. We won that strike. We defeated the city in the biggest and the best way. And that was, they made our union a union.
When I got hired in '85, I could still feel that. And I still feel it today. And Dick, there's so much more to cover here. And as I look back as a president, coming in after my president, Dick Mayberry, and I think about the gains of the firefighters in the 70s that went out on strike and the things that we have today. And everybody needs to understand this. You did not have these things prior to members of your union taking the kind of actions that they did in the 60s and the 70s, and I'll name them off. You know, I came in, we didn't have dental insurance, we didn't have vision insurance, we didn't have FLSA. We worked, our overtime was straight time, and we were very glad to have it. We didn't have union release time. We had to bargain for that. We didn't
have shift trades.
No, we didn't have shift trades. We didn't have the kind of sick leave allowances that we have today. We don't have the kind of vacation. You can look at everything in an MOU today, and it really stems back to those days, and that, I would say, that decade of time between probably 1967 and 1977. That is what made, to me, in California, fire service labor. There were strikes all over the state: Vallejo, San Francisco, Palo Alto. Some, and if I'm getting them wrong, I apologize.
No, you're right.
There were things happening everywhere. We need to internalize and strengthen our union movement as firefighters. We need to ally up with our partners in labor, whether it's the building trades, the amalgamated transit workers, the nurses, the teachers, and there are things at play on a much bigger scale today to take us apart. And it generally isn't your city. It generally isn't your legislation. But there are, or legislators, there are folks in those areas that would do that. And there are groups that would do that. And I think where I want to leave our membership as we build our union legacy and reignite it, men and women, never forget the wolf is always at the door. And they don't knock and they don't ask, they bust the door down. And I'm going to ask you, Dick, for your closing thoughts on this.
My closing thoughts are this, Brian. Thank you. When I said they made our union, this became a benchmark. This was a benchmark. The benchmark was before and after. After means this: we were a union of the city firefighters, of 415 firefighters, 522. We had probably 18 fire districts and other cities, that were not union at all. Within probably 3 to 5 years, we grew from a single city fire union to those mergers and consolidations and becoming a part of Sacramento Firefighters 522. We took in probably 15 or 17 different fire agencies within to become union 522 firefighters. We had cities that were then at the time: Woodland, Davis, Roseville, Cameron Park, West Sacramento. And then all of these fire districts came into our union, and subsequently we merged most all of those into becoming Sac City,
an amalgamated union,
amalgamated union, Metro. We probably took all of those 15, 18 over the years and brought them into now where we have about 6, 7 agencies that are all 522 membership. We also became right away. The day after we became active in our labor council. We stayed active. We're active in our labor. We have a presence. We're respected in the labor movement, and we got political. That next day, we had an election shortly after the strike, and we elected. We had these silent, worthless, council persons that were minions. They were minions of the managers. We elected Phil Eisenberg.
I remember Phil.
We elected Lloyd Connolly.
I remember Lloyd.
These were both became assemblymen.
Uh-huh.
We elected Bob Matsui, who became a congressman.
Yep.
We elected Ann Rudin. And the one thing we asked in when we made endorsements for those elections, we only asked one thing. Tom Hebner was assistant city manager. Rathon was retiring. We said, you can pick any city manager in the world. Don't appoint Tom Hebner. And they didn't. When Rathon retired, he got dumped. He left the city of Sacramento humiliated because he didn't get the job. He went to San Antonio. Wherever we went, we followed him. We sent letters to their media, the unions. We haunted that guy. He ended up dying, working as a city manager in a little small town, outside of Palm Springs. That's where he did. I had on my list to continue following him. I put it in the back. I was going to send a letter to that little town. He died on a bike trail or something. So
you didn't have to send your letter.
Didn't have to send that letter.
That's almost a mic drop right there, that you followed the city manager through his career.
Almost to his death.
Dick, there's so much more to go over.
Yeah, there is a lot.
And Dick, I just want to thank you for joining me, not only to talk about this event, but the history of Local 522 and our firefighter union movement. You've just had a front row seat to that, and not just a seat, you have been an active participant. And myself and everybody, we owe you and many others that we don't even know a debt of gratitude, a thank you, and in my opinion, to put our North Star up that we can follow. And I do believe we are following that to make it better, to make the job better, to make it as safe as you can in a dangerous work environment. You laid the history of that, men all across this state, too numerous to mention. This is a kind of history that not only do we need to make sure that our members know it, but we need to live by it, and we need to grow and meet the needs of the time and the circumstance and the situations that we're in, and we absolutely have to be fully engaged. And I think that's one of the things that you've taught me and many other union leaders, past and present, have taught us. We have to stay relevant, we have to stay in tune, and we have to keep pushing the ball forward for our members. So
we have to have solidarity.
If
divide and conquer, that's out there. It's out there. If we don't stay together as the family, if we've been and always hopefully will be, with solidarity.
And that's, you know what? We're going to close out with that. Solidarity is it's our sentinel. It's the most important thing we have. I want to thank you, Dick. To our listeners, thank you for listening in to another episode of the CPF Firewire. I'm Brian Rice. I'm the president of the California Professional Firefighters. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
You can find CPF Firewire at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, or wherever you find podcasts. Be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. You can also find CPF Firewire at the CPF website, www.cpf.org, and on the CPF YouTube page. We're always interested in getting your feedback, comments, and criticism. Tell us what you'd like to hear about. Drop us a line, info@cpf.org. CPF Firewire is a production of California Professional Firefighters. Our producer is Carol Wills. Our engineer is Matt McDermott. Please join us next month for another edition of CPF Firewire.